In the beginning, everything seemed normal. Like anyone else, I started school. The first few weeks were about making new friends, attending classes, and getting lost in the crowded hallways. But this place was different. It felt like no one could see it. I, like many others, woke up every morning, getting ready for school. Everything seemed like a routine, just like everyone else's life. But one day, I felt something that would change the course of my life forever. I tried to ignore it. It was so brief, but at that moment, something inside me shifted. I couldn't explain it, but the moment was enough to pull me into something I didn't understand, and it never let me go. I remember that first moment so well. I entered the big school gate, and everything seemed like any other day. But something was off. Maybe that's why I felt different. It was just a fleeting glance, a thought that something was wrong. But it was so quick, like nothing had happened. The school was filled with people. In the crowd, no one would notice. No one would know how scared I was. But then, he noticed me. The principal, always present, always somewhere. You know, the kind of figure that usually just walks around, the one you see in school. That one. At first, it seemed like just a coincidence. Everything seemed so ordinary, but I could feel it. Every time he was near, it felt like something was watching me. It wasn't a big deal, not yet. Just a few brief encounters here and there. But each time, I felt a little more trapped. His eyes. Every time they got closer, I felt it. But everyone just thought he was walking the halls, just doing his job. As time went on, these encounters started happening more frequently. In the classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, even during breaks. Each time, the discomfort grew. It was no longer subtle. It was becoming more intense. The small touches, the unnecessary glances, the odd, lingering presence. The strange way he would approach me. It wasn't a mistake anymore. He was intentionally closing in on me. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that it couldn't be happening. But it was. And each time I would encounter him, it felt like I was losing more of myself. I was becoming invisible, and yet, I was trapped in his gaze. Then one day. That day, nothing was the same anymore. Everyone had gone out of the classroom for a break, and I was left behind, like always. And there he was again. It seemed so normal at first, just him walking up to me, like any other time. But this time, it changed. I froze. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Everything stopped. The world froze for a second. It was like I was frozen in time. His touch sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed with fear. That moment was the start of everything changing. I couldn't describe it to anyone. I didn't know how to say it. The feeling was unbearable. His cold hands, the oppressive silence, the smile, it all felt so wrong. I was completely trapped. After that day, everything felt darker. The harassment, the fear, everything intensified. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always watching me, always around. But when I came home, everything seemed normal. My family, school, my life, it was as if nothing had changed. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to scream, to cry, to explain everything. But every time I thought about it, I felt like I couldn't. No one would believe me. I couldn't even tell them what had happened, because in my mind, they would think I was exaggerating. So I stayed silent. I was scared. Terrified. And it was killing me. At dinner one night, I almost said something. I was asked, how was school? But my throat closed up, and my mind went blank. I wanted to say something. But the words wouldn't come. It felt like I was drowning, suffocating. I couldn't look them in the eye. I couldn't tell them what had been happening. I felt so alone. The fear of not being believed was stronger than the pain I was carrying. But that fear was eating me alive. So, I stayed silent. Days passed, and slowly, something shifted inside me. Every day, I felt more desperate. More suffocated. But at the same time, something was changing in me. I started to realize I couldn't live this way anymore. I couldn't let him control me. I couldn't let my fear dictate my every move. I knew I needed to take a step, but I didn't know how. Every day, I tried to focus on my studies, keep myself busy, but the haunting feeling stayed. Then one day, during a break at school, one of my classmates came to me. It was unexpected. I never thought anyone would reach out to me. But I felt something in her eyes. It was different. She wasn't like the others. And in that moment, I decided to tell her. I didn't think I could, but I did. Can we talk? She asked. And in that moment, everything changed. I finally opened up. I told her everything. The words flowed. And she listened. She didn't judge, didn't interrupt. She just listened. That day, for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone had heard me. It was the start of something new. I realized I could talk to someone about this. I could ask for help. If I could share this with just one person, maybe, just maybe, I could tell my family. I could stop hiding. And so, I took the first step. Telling my family, that was the hardest part. For so long, I had kept everything inside. But I knew it was time. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to tell someone. And that someone had to be my mother. I could feel her presence when I walked into the room. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what. "Mom," I said, "there's something I need to tell you." I hesitated for a moment. My heart raced. I was terrified. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know what she would think. But then, I just said it. At school, something happened. The principal, he. Before I could finish my sentence, my voice caught. Tears welled up in my eyes. I was shaking. But she didn't interrupt. She just sat down next to me, took my hand, and said, "I believe you. We'll handle this together." In that moment, I felt relief. I felt like I could finally breathe again. My mom didn't question me. She didn't doubt me. She believed me. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. After that, things began to change. My family believed me. Together, we went to the school administration. They began to look into the principal's actions. But more than that, I had found my voice. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spoken up, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. I could finally move forward. I wasn't alone anymore. I had my family. I had my strength. And I had the courage to stand up. The principal's behavior was investigated, and I was no longer the girl hiding in the shadows. I had become someone who was ready to fight back. And now, I'm ready to use my story to help others. I'm not afraid anymore. And neither should you be.